So good evening and welcome everyone to the MHCH Housing Justice Educational Forum. Tonight we will be taking a deep dive into SB 4, the new bill that changes the zoning for land belonging to religious congregations and nonprofit colleges so that it can be used for affordable housing. Abram Diaz of the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California, who led the campaign for SB 4, and Phil Burns, principal planner of the Arroyo Group and the chair of the MHCH Congregational Land Committee, who helped shape SB 4, are here to give an overview of the law and answer questions. But first, we will have a brief reflection by Anthony Mansus, a short video, and the MHCH team report. So I'm going to hand it over to Anthony for an inspirational reflection. Anthony?
Hi, everybody. I'm Anthony Mansus, and full disclosure, I am a Quaker. And so what you're going to hear today is a Quaker perspective. For today's reflection, I'd like to focus on the motto, making housing and community happen, which is taken from the prophet Micah, who declared that everyone beneath their vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. In other words, it's God's intention for everyone to have secure, decent, and affordable housing. Micah also declared that, quote, nations shall turn their swords into plowshares and study war no more. Micah makes the connection between war and housing insecurity and displacement. During the past few weeks, we have seen the devastating effects of war, not only on women and children and families, but also on their homes. Over 100,000 Armenians fled their homes in Nagorno-Karabakh, fearing ethnic cleansing. Nearly 170,000 residences were damaged and nearly 16,000 homes destroyed in Gaza since October 7th. 1/3 of Ukrainians have been displaced since the Russian invasion 2 years ago. That's nearly 12 million people. According to a UN report, worldwide, 108 million people lost their homes due to war by the end of 2023, and 35 million had to leave their homeland due to war. These numbers are staggering and mind-numbing, but we need to face the fact that our country bears its share of responsibility for these wars, since we are by far the largest arms exporter, or as Dr. King put it, purveyor of violence in the world. We produce and sell 40% of the world's weapons. So I'd like to close by asking us to reflect on how war is affecting not only the world, but also our homeland. President Eisenhower gave a famous speech in 1953 in which he said, every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. These are prophetic words, especially when you consider that President Biden is asking for over $100 billion in additional military aid to Ukraine and Israel, and many in Congress are eager to allocate these funds. Just to be clear, $100 billion could pay for 200,000 homes and end chronic homelessness in our nation. So let's pray tonight that our leaders take to heart the words of Micah and spend our tax dollars not on weapons of war, but on basic human needs like education, medical care, and housing. So I'd like to share with you a brief video. It's a little bit dated. It was put out a year and a half ago that describes some of the things that our organization has been doing. So I'm going to...
Our city and state are facing a growing housing and homelessness crisis, but we know that there are solutions if we're willing to take action. For over 10 years, this city-owned land in Pasadena was vacant. For 9 months, we advocated for affordable housing, and now there will be a groundbreaking for 69 units of affordable housing for unhoused seniors. For decades, this city-owned land was vacant. Soon there will be 111 units of affordable housing right next to our magnificent City Hall, thanks to our advocacy. Church parking lots are often underutilized. With our partner, Foothill Unity Center, we have launched the first safe parking program in the San Gabriel Valley. Today, our unhoused neighbors can sleep safely in their cars and are on the path to becoming permanently housed. Our goal is to have safe parking programs throughout the San Gabriel Valley. We have 56 churches interested in having affordable housing built on their underutilized land, and we anticipate them planning for 1,000 units in the next year. At Making Housing and Community Happen, we are transforming cities, churches, and lives through affordable housing. Pasadena has reduced its homeless count by 56%, from 1,216 in 2011 to 527 in 2020. Our goal is to end chronic homelessness and ensure that there is decent and affordable housing for all who need it. You are invited to join us. Well, so you may have recognized the voice in that video. That person's still around, but some of the information in that is dated. But I'm going to do the team reports right now. So let me share my screen, and it'll give you some of the updates since we did that video. That video was like summer of 2022. So let me put this on slideshow. We go from the beginning. So this is what is happening, what's happening at MHCH, or otherwise known as the team reports. So Making Housing and Community Happen, MHCH, we're a small organization. We have a small staff, just 5 part-time staff, and then Jill and Anthony are full-time volunteers. They do the lion's share of the work, but we don't pay them. But we have done a lot of stuff. We've done amazing stuff, what you heard in that video. We have many volunteers, and we have 4 different teams, and that's mostly what I want to talk about right here, give an update on the teams. So safe parking, you heard about that in the video. There are about 15,000 people living in their vehicles in Los Angeles County, but until a couple of years ago, there was no safe parking program in the whole San Gabriel Valley. But we started one with Trinity Lutheran Church here in Pasadena. They're the host site, and Foothill Unity Center, who's providing the services. Our program has 8 safe places to park. They get access to a bathroom in the church. They get case management services from Foothill Unity Center, mental health treatment, referrals to other resources such as permanent housing. So people are being permanently housed through this program. So there's been as many as 50 people on the waiting list, and we know that at least 2 parkers waited a year to get into the program. So we're looking for more sites. We want to expand to at least 1 more in Pasadena. And as the video said, we want to expand to more sites throughout the San Gabriel Valley. If you want to volunteer, be on the committee, contact Wendy McGrail. That's Wendy, BMCGRAIL @gmail.com. If you want to make a referral, if you know somebody who's living in their vehicle and you want to make a referral to the safe parking program, then contact Catherine. That's Catherine at FoothillUnityCenter.org or 626-358-3486, 626-358-3486. Next is our Congregational Land Committee. This committee consults with congregations to build affordable housing, and they're grant funded. So this is a team of experts. They have affordable housing experts, city planners. One of the chair of the committee is one of the main speakers tonight. So they can do feasibility studies, write a request for proposal, help interview developers. And they have had 85 congregations express interest in their services. 25 of them have completed the prep classes, what we call a cohort, to what we require that for further consultation. This team has done 22 feasibility studies for congregations, done 3 RFPs, and they now have 3 developer agreements. So 3 congregations have agreements with developers, and are ready to move forward. They're also doing an apprenticeship program to start set up teams in other parts of the country. So teams are emerging in Washington State, Colorado, Texas, and Northern California. This is sort of religious overlay zones is the main topic of the night tonight, but I want to give a little bit of history here. Most of the congregations, 2/3 of the congregations that have approached our Congregational Land Committee don't have the right zoning for affordable housing. And if you try to change the zoning site by site, first of all, you don't know if you can do it. And then secondly, it will add years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to the cost. A lot of affordable housing developers won't even touch a site if the zoning is not right. So we've been trying to do overlay zones across whole jurisdictions. This was done in Seattle. We started to do it in California. The first place we did it is Sierra Madre, the little sleepy bucolic town right next to Pasadena. They were the first place in California. We did one in Pasadena. We got it into the housing elements of a number of other Southern California cities, but simultaneously we were working at a state level with a larger coalition. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight is SB4. That's the overlay zone across the whole state. So that's the main topic for tonight. I want to talk about our next two teams, though. Affordable and supportive housing advocates. This is our main advocacy team here in Pasadena. Some of the fruit of their advocacy in the last 10 years, you saw in the video, it mentioned Heritage Square South. That's 69 units of permanent supportive housing for seniors who are experiencing homelessness. Seniors are the fastest growing segment of our homeless population. And in the video, you saw we did that in summer of 2022. They were just breaking ground. If you go by there now, to the corner of Orange Grove and Fair Oaks in Pasadena, it's almost completed. According to the Bridge website, Bridge Housing that is building it, it's going to be completed in early 2024. So that'll be 69 units of permanent supportive housing. Right on the heels of that, I'd also mentioned this in the video, we won over 100 units of senior housing in the Civic Center. National Corps is building that. The latest they said to us is that about half of it's going to be permanent supportive housing for seniors who've been experiencing homelessness. So our ASHA team is responsible for a lot of the permanent supportive housing that is being built in our city now, or will be built. Will be built soon. This team has done a lot of things, and I can't list them all here, but these are two of the big things they've done in recent years. Right now, one of the things we're looking at is school land. There are 10 sites in Pasadena, 10 school sites, public school sites that have closed. 3 of them are sitting empty. Nothing is happening. And right now, the school board is currently considering the old Roosevelt Elementary School site that closed in 2019 as a possibility for affordable staff housing. So we are getting behind that. That's one of the things we're looking at. Next is our North Fair Oaks team. This is a group of churches on North Fair Oaks. This is a part of the city that has been historically neglected. They want to beautify and not gentrify that part of the city. They want to do it with signage, more trees, sidewalk repairs, and affordable housing. And also they want to do something called complete streets, which is redesigning the streets so it'll be usable by cars and cyclists and people using all modes of transportation. So they've been developing a vision plan with the neighborhood. They want this vision plan to help shape the city's specific plan for North Fair Oaks. The city has specific plans for various parts of the city, and we're developing a vision plan to help address that. And so this team has been having events in the neighborhood to get neighborhood input, and they have one more left. And that next event is going to be November 19th at New Life Holiness Church, which is going to be our annual celebration. So we're calling it Visioning Our Future, Affordable Accessible Housing for All. It's the MHCH annual celebration, November 19th, 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. At New Life Holiness Church here in Pasadena. If you're around, we would love to have you come. The first hour is going to be outdoors. Anybody can come to that. The second hour is going to be indoors because it's a limited space. There's only room for 100 people, so we have to sell tickets for that. It's going to be $25 or whatever you can afford. Some people can afford a lot more, but some people can't afford $25. But whatever it is you can afford, we just need to sell tickets to limit it to 100 people for the second hour. But would love to have you come. And later on, I'll put in the chat a link where you can go to get more information and buy a ticket if you want to do that. We have a congregational network of more than 20 congregations that participate in MHCH here in Pasadena. If you want your congregation to be part of the network, contact me, Bert Newton. You can get me on email, bert@makinghousinghappen.org. My phone number is 626-993-7958. Last thing I want to mention is our one-day housing justice institutes. These are city-specific. Jill and Lucero spend months meeting with leaders in the city. They go into a city, they meet with the faith leaders, other leaders in the community, study the history of the city, the history of housing, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what's likely to work. And after months of preparation, they have their one-day institute where people come together to learn and to network with each other. And out of that, a local housing justice group is birthed. So this is kind of MHCH's way of replicating ourselves in other parts of the city. If you want to do this in your city, contact Jill Shook, jill@makinghousinghappen.org, or jill@makinghousinghappen.com. Either one of those works. But that's if you want to have an institute in your city. So that does it for the team reports. That brings us to our main presentation. So let me introduce our presenters. Abram Diaz currently serves as the policy director of the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California. Prior to that, he worked in the legislature for 5 years and championed bills on housing, gun violence prevention, COVID-19 relief, and he is passionate about working to reduce income inequality by removing barriers to affordable housing development and supporting smart growth policies. He recently served as the co-chair of the California Latinx Capital Association and helped support and mentor young Latinos entering the public policy space. He earned his bachelor's at UC Santa Cruz and an MPA at the University of Southern California. Phil Burns is the leader of the Arroyo Group, a 45-year-old planning and urban design firm. Phil brings the firm's resources to the MHCH Congregational Land Committee to analyze and write zoning, develop entitlement strategies, build consensus with community leaders and neighbors, and facilitate dialogues within churches. Phil has prepared housing elements, transit-oriented development plans, zoning ordinances, and urban design plans for LA Metro and cities across Southern California. Phil served as a planning trainer in the Peace Corps in Guatemala, and he has been an elder and children's ministry director at Pasadena Presbyterian Church. As Phil and Andre make their presentation, you can drop questions in the chat, and they will answer them at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to hand it off first to Phil. Phil, take it away.
Thank you so much, Bert, and pleasure to see everyone here. It's great to see so many familiar faces from throughout the past couple of years, and with good reason, right? Because we have an exciting and great news to share with SB4 today. I'm going to start by giving just a brief kind of introduction of how we got here and why building affordable housing on congregational land is so critical. So let's say you're a community member, a community leader, and you want to do affordable housing. Well, what do you need? Got to have land, got to have the right zoning, got to have community support. How do you find land? The way that most communities have found land recently, this is an example of recent projects, affordable housing projects built in Pasadena. It is either on city land or it's on faith-based land. In Pasadena's case, we have 4 of the last 5 projects built in Pasadena have been on city land. But guess what? The city does not have infinite amount of land. And the cities have a lot of other things they have to do with their land as well. So the attention is turning ever more to faith-based land. Why faith-based land? Well, many reasons. Missional motivations of our congregation. Hopefully that's number one, at least among us that are people of faith. Declining attendance, unfortunately, is a reality that many face. And this is a way to repurpose space, and it's also a way to financially stabilize these long-term community institutions. It's also a good way of thinking about using land. Most congregational properties are not busy 6 days out of the week. And so can we do something that makes better use of that property? The Turner Center for Housing in Berkeley found that there are about 39,000 acres of land in California used as religious institutions and potentially developable. And guess what? Unlike the areas where the majority of our affordable housing is built here in Los Angeles, it's often in South LA, other, low opportunity areas, other areas that really need affordable housing, but also we're not seeing as much affordable housing built in the Beverly Hills, built in the San Marino, built in those places that really offer their residents the top quality of life where people can thrive, right? Religious congregation property, 45% of it is located in the high or highest opportunity neighborhoods. And church membership, of course, is declining, and I don't need to tell that to most of the folks that are here. We experience that. But that means, of course, our buildings are unused. They're getting older. They're getting harder to maintain. When something breaks, there's a financial crisis in the church. Isn't that right? And finally, congregations' mission, right? So much of services to folks that are struggling, and particularly to the homeless, all throughout the United States, is done by faith-based organizations. And many congregations, perhaps many of you, already have housing on your property. We found in Pasadena that 40% of those who responded to the congregations that responded to our survey were interested in building affordable housing on their property. So what happens when you want to do it? Okay. And there have been affordable housing developments built on religious congregation land for some time. Sometimes those are very successful. Other times they may be successful developments, but they're not always successful partnerships between churches or congregations and developers. We really think that congregations should know, and particularly now that SB4 has addressed many of the barriers that we face, that we used to face, that congregations have the right to, to determine what happens on their property, right? Congregations should actually lead with a vision for how they imagine their property transforming with a new affordable housing development on it. And the best practice that we see is also that congregations receive missional, but also economic benefits. They are giving away land, or at least leasing land for a very long period of time to a developer. And in most cases, congregations do have a need to recoup financially some consideration for that land. Third, congregations should partner with developers. They should know, if you're coming here thinking, hey, I'm going to do it myself, kudos to you, but no, it's a very, very difficult process to build affordable housing. And that's why we have experts, developers that do that. And finally, that building city support is critical in this. So just briefly, just to say as well, our Congregational Land Committee was formed to help guide congregations through that process, help you identify a viable, impactful, mutually beneficial plan for affordable housing that's supported by all the parties that need it, and then help you select a qualified and prepared affordable housing developer that'll give a congregation a fair deal for the use of their property. We have a process that we guide, that we work with congregations, advise them through the process, helping them get to having a successful deal, a successful project, and really recouping, again, those missional and economic benefits that congregations should get with that. As we started working on all of this, and as Bert mentioned, we kept running up against a big barrier, which was the zoning of sites, congregational sites that we wanted to build affordable housing on. And so we started working on local congregational land overlay zones. We started working in Pasadena. It was an arduous 2-year process. Many of you were involved throughout in the advocacy. And, you know, those of us who were there, we know that we're happy that something was passed, but it was really ultimately a very weak policy that was passed by the city of Pasadena, which really led us to think, not just us, but people all up and down California to think, is there another solution that we can provide at the state level that can address some of these barriers that we're facing? So with that, I will hand it off to Abram, who is going to tell us about SB4, its process, and what it ultimately is.
And I just want to say, I want to apologize to Abram. I think I called him Andre. Jill tells me I called him Andre right before I introduced him.
No worries.
But yeah, this is Abram, not Andre. Andre is another person on our Congregational Land Committee. Anyway, go ahead, Abram.
No worries. Hey, everybody. I'm going to start by dropping in the chat the actual language of the state measure, which turned from an idea to a bill to actual law just a couple of weeks ago, and it's going to be active law starting January 1, 2024. Now, the genesis of this, as you heard from Phil and others, is we have a lot of faith-owned land, faith institutional land that we'd like to build affordable housing on. Again, it's an option. It's a volunteer choice. You don't have to do it. It's only if you would like to do it. And if you would like to do it, the state has an interest in making it a lot easier for you, especially in the permitting and the processing of a lot of the legal work and paperwork you need to do to get it done. So we introduced Senate Bill 4. This was the third attempt. I won't bore you with the history. This is the third and luckily final attempt, thanks to the great work of people like Phil, Bert, and Jill, and Anthony, and a lot of others. I see a few like Taryn on the call too, to pass through the state legislature a streamlining provision for affordable housing on land owned by faith institutions. And it was passed by the state legislature and signed by the governor just a couple weeks ago. The broad summary: this measure streamlines the production of 100% affordable housing units on land owned by faith institutions. So it's not market housing, it's not mixed income housing, it's really affordable housing. That means housing units that are for folks who make 80% of your area median income or less. So folks who, you know, for the state, we consider them to be on the brink of, you know, really being vulnerable. There are two small exceptions to that I'll just mention out there. We allow for 20% of the units to be moderate income units. That means up to 120% area median income. The idea there being there are working families, nurses, teachers, firefighters who may need a place to live, and we want you to be able to open up your units to those folks, or at least a portion of those units. And the second exemption, we allow for institutions to set aside 5% of your units for staff of the institution. And that was important because you may have folks, you know, in your institution that might benefit from living in these units. We want to make sure you're actually able to do that. So those are the two exceptions to the 100% affordable housing rule there. And in exchange for that, you will be able to streamline the production and permitting process. There will not be any mandated local government meetings. You won't have to go through CEQA. It's going to make it a lot simpler. I will say there are 3 big pieces that you do have to follow with your projects under SB4. And those are done for, I'll be honest, political reasons. If you want to pass a big housing idea through the state legislature, you're going to need to strike a couple of compromises. And those fall into 3 big categories. The first one being labor. You know, there's a lot of union construction workers in the state, a lot of construction workers in general, and we want to ensure that the housing that we're building through this bill, in exchange for making it easier on folks on the front end of the paperwork and on the legal sense, we want to ensure workers are well taken care of. So in order to do that, the bill requires 3 things. 1, you have to pay prevailing wage, which is oftentimes common practice in affordable housing units anyway. So a lot of times it won't cost you an extra cent that folks weren't already planning on. And prevailing wage varies by county, but essentially it's a livable wage for a worker and their family, something perhaps a lot of us could be supportive of in general. The second portion is if you're building a really big project, we're talking 50 units or more, you also have to include payment to the workers for healthcare. And that would be monthly payments, for healthcare that would cover a family of 4. And that's all in the bill as well. I just wanted to talk about it since we're here to, just catch up and get up to speed. The third provision is a provision that directs your developer or builder to ask for local apprentices to come work on the project. It's not a requirement, it's a priority practice. So the idea there is that we're going to build up the next rank of union workers using these housing projects. So I know that's quite a bit there, but that is the labor side. Happy to review it and also happy to include it here in our text as well. Secondly, we have some restrictions around height and density. Now, generally, we fought pretty hard to ensure that we have some very reasonable restrictions there to allow you to build the kinds of projects that make sense, while also providing a lot of flexibility. Basically, what we don't allow is a giant skyscraper in the middle of a neighborhood. Probably not something any of us were looking to build anyway. But we have some limitations. If you're in a residential area, in a single family area, you can go 1 story above what's around you. So if it's a lot of 2-story homes, you're looking at 3 stories. If you're in a more urban area where maybe around you there's 4 or 5 story buildings, you can go up 1 story above that and ensure you have the height you need to build a project. You can, of course, use a density bonus to make it a little bit denser as well. And then the third big piece is on the environmental side. And these are listed fairly clearly within the bill itself. A lot of obvious factors many of us probably didn't want to dive into anyway, but things that are important to note. You can't build near hazardous waste sites. I don't think many of us may want to do that anyway because it's a huge cleanup issue, but you can't build there. You can't build in certain wildfire zones. You can't build on land conserved for really endangered habitats. We also have some setbacks. If you're near an oil well, you're going to have to be 3,200 feet away in order to take advantage of SB4. I know that can be kind of hard to judge. I'm going to put a map here that was drawn up by some of our partners. And that map will show you some big plots of land where SB4 does not apply, unless we cap that oil well. In that case, that little red mark goes completely away and folks are able to build because we cleaned up the area. We also have a couple of restrictions near really dense industrial zones, but also allow a bit of flexibility around other kinds of industrial zones, as long as you could pass a phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessment, and there won't be any hazardous substances in the land itself. You can move forward with your project. I'll be honest, that last piece, oftentimes we do a lot of those tests anyway, especially if you're a builder. You want to ensure what you're building on is safe for human habitation. So these are oftentimes a lot of practices that would occur regardless. We just want to put them in the bill so folks who feel better about the streamlined process of the measure itself. So that's my summary of SB4 there. Happy to answer any questions and happy to pass it back to Phil and Bert.
Yes, I think Phil is going to give us some case studies, and then we'll go into Q&A.
All right, here we go. Share the screen again. All right, here we go. So you want to see what SB4 looks like in practice. Here's a couple of examples, and perhaps, this will spark your own interest about a congregation that you're a part of or that you know about, and we'd love to see this happen. Okay, so the first one is in the city of Artesia in the South Bay of Los Angeles County. This is a quite large congregation that has 9.5 acres of land in it. So that's quite a big plot of land within urban LA County that is just occupied by this one congregation. As you can see, it's a pretty thriving congregation, but they have a lot of open space back here that is really not being used. It is zoned for single family residential, right? So what can you build on this beautiful piece of land right here? Well, you can build 17 single family homes. I will tell you that if you did that, those single family homes would probably go for easily $1 million each, probably more than that. No affordable housing is possible on this land. SB4, this is what it's for, right? SB4 goes kind of around the local zoning, the density restriction that is imposed by the zoning, and allows an affordable housing development at 30 dwelling units per acre. In this case, could be up to 3 stories and even up to, somewhere in the range of 72 to 130 units on there. It's a feasible site for affordable housing development. All right, here's another one. So this congregation in East Whittier, another suburban area of Southern California, this is a congregation that we worked very closely with prior to the passing of SB4. And through quite a bit of negotiation with planning staff at the city of Whittier at the time, we came up with a development plan here to take the back of this congregational site, which was 131 parking spaces back here, and turn it into 31 single-family bungalows. Why single-family bungalows? If we're trying to do affordable housing, I think most people will understand that most affordable housing is multifamily housing, right? Because we only have a certain amount of land. We want to make it economical. We've got to try to divide the cost of that land between as many housing units as we can. When it's single family, there's less units, obviously, to do that. It's an interesting, exciting project. But the issue with it was that it was designed at a time when it has a size that is really not workable for developers of affordable housing through the traditional tax credit means. And since the city of Whittier was not willing to put up any money for this project either, it was going to require a very creative developer who could take advantage of low interest rates at the time to build housing units that could basically be built with all private dollars and pencil out to be rented for affordable rates. The other big issue with this is that this single-family development met a specific standard or a specific kind of development zoning pathway called the planned development pathway, which would allow you to build single-family homes, but not in the typical way that single-family homes are built. You can see that these single-family bungalows are indeed actually attached. They're arranged around shared courtyards. They don't have private front yards and backyards like the single-family homes down here. And so for the city to do this, they would have to take a vote among the planning commission to recommend approval, and then take a vote among the city council to actually adopt this. And in that process, there's often a lot, even if they approve it, there's often a lot of additional kind of things that are put on the developers that they need to do. So we were faced with trying to find kind of the holy grail developer who was willing to use private money to execute an experimental project with a lot of risk and really not very much reward, because ultimately all of this housing was going to be affordable housing. Over time, interest rates changed. Obviously, the development didn't really pencil out anymore. But luckily SB4 was passed. So what does SB4 allow us to do in this case? It's going to allow a roughly 90 unit senior housing apartment building here, 3 stories, to be located again on this back parking lot, somewhat separated from the residential neighborhood around, and providing ground lease income to this church to continue operating or plan for the next step in its future, which otherwise would probably be closure. All right, finally, here, Crossroads United Methodist Church in the city of Compton. And Crossroads is a little bit different. The other two were in single family zones. And so obviously just restrictive zoning, and SB4 really removes that barrier. This one is a little bit more complicated. What you see the existing campus here, this is their sanctuary, and this is their fellowship hall and their classrooms. It's a very active church with a lot of community programs going on. And so they really wanted to build affordable housing on their property, but they also wanted to really continue and even improve the ministries that they're doing in the community, that they have a lot of really important ones. And so ultimately the plan that we came up with in working with this congregation was to take out the fellowship hall and the classrooms building at the southern part of the campus and replace it with a 3 to 4 story affordable housing building. Now, senior housing building. So now we tried to do it in many ways that would not touch the existing fellowship hall and the classrooms, but really it just didn't quite fit to do it on that way. So we are also replacing the demolished buildings with a new congregational building that'll sit out here on the street corner, nice and visible, a new 2-story building that will serve all of their ministry functions. The site is zoned CL, limited commercial, in the city of Compton, which is generally for commercial use, but actually in this case also allows multifamily housing with a conditional use permit. So what was the issue here? Sorry, my screen is gone. So yeah, so what was the issue here? The conditional use permit is, again, one of those discretionary processes. It's one of those processes that the Planning Commission gets to say yay or nay to. I'd had the I don't know if you call it the blessing, but I had the opportunity to observe a couple of recent discretionary entitlement processes in the city of Compton. One was a single family project, a townhome project that a developer was trying to build. And although it was ultimately approved, it wasn't approved until the developer agreed to provide 2.5 parking spaces for every housing unit on the property. And that's a typical kind of, thing that planning commissions and cities ask for in return for approving a development. If you go back and look at this plan, you'll see that there is a decent amount of parking here, but it is not a large amount of parking. It's certainly not 2 spaces per unit. It's actually quite a bit less than that, and also leaves some parking for congregational use on site. The other entitlement process went through Planning Commission, City Council. This particular type of process had to actually have 2 affirmative votes. The city approved the project in the first vote in June 2021, after which the developer was able to go out, bring in over $30 million of state funding to support to build the affordable housing, but the city never approved never took the second vote until 16 months later for unknown reasons. And during that period, some of the funding expired, the interest rate environment changed, things changed, the project didn't pencil out. Ultimately, that project is not going to go forward. These are the kind of risks that the discretionary process was really going to impose on this project. So that's step 1. Step 2, last year, AB 2011 was passed. That is a bill that allows housing in commercial zones. AB 2011 establishes a by right process, or a process that doesn't require those kinds of up and down votes by governing bodies to be able to build housing. And so we thought that was our ticket. Well, until we realized that building the new building, and we confirmed this with the city planner. Building the AB 2011 allowed us to build the housing by right, but it did not allow us to build a new building for the congregation. Indeed, that was going to have to go to a discretionary approval. And that meant that the entire project was going to have to go to discretionary approval and be negotiated, like those other ones that I mentioned. So finally, SB 4, you have it, allows housing by right, and also allows